What's up, everybody? I'm Brother Zach. I'm a Franciscan friar. I love trail running, and this is my channel. Now, I posted a video a few months ago about my experience running the JFK 50 miler. That seemed to get a little bit of positive feedback, so I figured, hey, might as well put up another video. I didn't expect that I'd be running another race until maybe sometime late in the summer, but things kind of changed, so I'm back earlier than expected, which is a good thing. My main purpose for wanting to start a channel was to share my experiences of the races that I've run with people who love running or are trying to get into running so they can see maybe what kind of races they want to actually do. I know that personally when I'm signing up for a new race, I just go on YouTube and just devour video after video of all of the experiences that people have had, all the uploads, the footage, everything I can find about a race so I can figure out what to expect when I actually show up to run this thing. But sometimes you really just can't get a good feel for what a race is really going to be like from watching like a highlight reel or a music video or something like that. So I kind of made this channel to provide maybe some more in-depth race analysis, hopefully without being too long-winded. That's kind of a problem I have sometimes, but I'll do my best. And if I can help a few people who end up watching these videos, then hey, I feel like I've done my job. So I have to admit that I know the title of this video is like a little bit clickbaitish or whatever, but it kind of captures the tone of exactly why I'm so happy I got a chance to run this race. I mean, I had decided to run this just a few days before it actually happened. The time between when I found out about it and I signed up for it was probably about 10 minutes. So it was a spur-of-the-moment decision, and I'm really happy that I made that decision in light of what was to come in the future that I didn't even know about yet. So I had been having a few good weeks of training, just running around the roads here in Washington, D.C., where I live, and I started to think, you know what, I've got a 100-miler I'm kind of training for on the horizon, but while I'm still early on in the mileage building cycle, I might as well see if I can put together maybe like a decent marathon somewhere along the line. My legs feel kind of fresh. I feel like maybe I could do something good. So I decided, let's check out online if there's anything going on near me that I might be able to sign up for. Unfortunately, almost everything I was able to find was either super expensive, like way more expensive than I'd ever be willing to spend on a road marathon, or I happened to be busy on the day that that event was taking place. But then I found the Seneca Greek Greenway Trail 50K, and I saw this and I was like, no way. Not only is this thing only $35 to enter, it's also in a week, the weather is supposed to be beautiful, and it's like a 45-minute drive from where I live. You can't beat that. Another cool thing about this race is that I had actually been to Seneca Creek Park before. It being so close, I had been there to go for a hike at one point, probably 6-7 months ago. And I remember hiking around the lake there thinking, man, this would be a really cool place to run an ultra or something similar to that, just a good trail run. And little did I know I was gonna get my wish. I also figured that because this wasn't really something that I had put a lot of mental energy into preparing for, I was just gonna use it as a chance to go for broke and just see what I could do. It's a 50K, I feel like I've got some speed at the moment, I might as well just go for it, and if everything falls apart, then so be it, at least I gave it a shot. And as I mentioned, the ride over to Seneca Creek State Park was relatively short, so I actually had an opportunity to really think about the course that I was going to be running and mentally prepare for it. I'm putting up a picture of the course map here for you to see, and as you can see, it's basically just trails the whole way through, with some road crossings here and there, but a lot of single track, just running through this sort of highway of forest and trail that covers the entire northwest area right outside of Washington, D.C. So really cool to be able to run on something this remote right outside of a metropolitan area. When I got to the park, sign up, registration, all the preparation for the race actually was handled really smoothly. There was a check-in table where they had everyone process real quickly. There was a bunch of porta potties set up. They had an entire like picnic pavilion all kind of closed off with heaters on the inside so people could kind of chill in there and wait for the race to start. And it's funny, I got there so soon before the race started, it felt like before I even really processed what it was I was about to do, we were off and running.
All race. I want to hear you at mile 30.
And right from the beginning, I started this thing off a little bit more aggressively than I might usually. For the first few minutes, I was somewhat conservative, but pretty much right off the bat, I was trying to find a pack that I thought would be pretty competitive. Not the front pack or anything like that, but a group that I thought might kind of drag me through to a really good time for the day. As for goals for the day, as usual, a lot of people will tell you have more than one goal. That way, if something goes wrong, you at least have something to fall back on. So my goal, my primary goal for the day, was to break 5 hours for the 50K. Now, I thought this was really lofty, especially because I had heard rumors beforehand that this course was actually over 32 miles, so I was pretty flexible on that. That one was a very high mark, and I was shooting for it, not really too worried about whether I hit it or not. The B goal was to just break 6 hours. I know that's a lot slower than my A goal, but really I had never done a lot of faster running around that 30 to 32 mile mark, so 6 hours would have been just about the fastest I had ever run 32 miles. I mean, I haven't done it a whole lot anyway, so I thought that was a good goal. And then, of course, C goal is to just finish. You always leave that on the table as just, if all else fails, just finish the race. It was kind of weird, actually, to be back on the trails again after, the quote-unquote off-season. I hadn't really expected to be back running another race that early, and it took me some time to really get in the mindset of like, okay, I'm running an ultra right now. It may be a somewhat shorter ultra at a 50K, but it's still going to be a long day. I'm going to be in a world of pain here. I'm not quite sure that when I started off that morning, I was totally prepared for what was to come. And for a while, I was kind of biding my time. I think it was about 6 miles in. I was still kind of in this group where we were going, not slow by any means, but a pace that was pretty significantly slower than I had planned on going. And I remember we got to this hill, and it was really hard to pass people because it was all single track. There was a lot of foliage on either side of the trail. And I just kind of said, I gotta move. I don't like going, making moves, passing people uphill, but it was time. So I kind of pulled off to the right, passed somebody, passed a few more people, and before you knew it, it was like I had started this movement. It kind of made me wonder how many other people behind me were just waiting to go, because as soon as I went, it was like the whole race took off. And before I knew it, I just found myself in this new pack that I had kind of inadvertently created. And it was a little bit intimidating, to be honest, because I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but I could kind of just look at the people around me and I was like, oh boy, these are some serious looking runners around me, and I'm in this group and it's either like sink or swim at this point. As much as I was loving being back out there and running and being on just these incredible trails, I couldn't ignore the fact that I just really didn't feel all that great. Something just felt a little bit off right from the start. I'm not entirely sure what it was. A lot of times in races like this, you get highs and you get lows, and you kind of work through the lows, you get back to the highs. But something about this, I was just kind of consistently feeling in kind of a low zone where I wasn't breaking out of it and nothing was really coming easily. To make matters worse, at probably about 15 miles right before you hit the point where the drop bags were on a creek crossing, I must have missed where you easily cross the creek, and I'm going across this log and I just fell directly in the creek. So now I've got soaking wet shoes. I hit the 15-mile point at right around 2 hours and 33 minutes. All right, so just past the halfway point, picked up my drop bag, got refill of some of my Goo energy drink. Past 15 miles at about 2:35. I was hoping to be a little bit faster than that, but it was a bit of a slow start. Kind of got stuck in a slower group that was moving single file for a while. Had to make a move to get out of that, and it burnt me a little bit. Kind of feel like I'm getting my mojo back a little bit now. We'll see what happens the next 15 miles or so. I don't think it's going to be a sub 5 type of day, but we'll see what we can do. Probably about 10 minutes after that halfway aid station, I took like a nasty fall on the trail. Did one of those things where I like rolled over, my hat flew off, my pack was like up over my shoulders, and I just kind of stood up and I was like, you know what? This thing is not over. I'm kind of beaten down. I don't feel great, but I've still got half of a race to put in, and I can still make this work. I may not be able to hit that initial time goal of 5 hours. That was lofty to begin with, but I can still put in a real good effort, try to chip off some time a little bit, mile after mile, and get myself in a position where I could still run a time that I'm proud of, even if it's gonna really hurt. And it really worked. For a while, I was making this really dramatic move, just kind of pushing hard. I was probably going pretty significantly less than 10-minute mile pace from around let's say mile 16 through about 21, 22. And I was feeling really good about the progress I was making, and I was even actually passing quite a few people. But sometime around mile 23, whatever was left of me just kind of fell apart. The wheels really fell off. In hindsight, I totally misjudged the difficulty of the course. It's one of those things when you do a course this one wasn't out and back, but it definitely went out to a certain point and came back in a different way, but you're covering the same topography, so you know that if you're going uphill on the way out, you're going to come downhill on the way back. Well, I had been under this complete a delusion that we were going uphill the whole way out. When I looked at the elevation chart after the race, I realized that wasn't true at all. But you can kind of be deceived into thinking that. So what I thought was going to be a downhill return run the entire last half of this race ended up being by far the most difficult part of the course, and it burnt me beyond all reason. Then I got to this point. I remember passing this guy, and he had asked me when I passed what mile we were at, and I don't know. I had no idea because I never run with a GPS watch or anything like that. And he said that his watch was saying one thing, someone who had passed him earlier had a watch that said something different. They were completely different, and then it started to psych me out. I didn't know where we were on the course. I didn't know how many miles were left. I didn't even know where the next aid station was. It started to turn into this complete mind game where I was just like lost and feeling like I was in the middle of the woods without any clue of what was going on. And the funny thing about this race is that even though it's billed as a 50K, there was actually an option to run what they called a marathon. Now, this was not a 26.2 mile marathon. This was kind of an arbitrary distance that cut off the last loop that they had on the course that wraps around a lake. You could just skip that loop and run something around 28 miles and change. And for the entire point up to, the last few miles of running, I tried to put that completely out of mind, going under the assumption that I'm gonna run the 50K if it kills me. And when I passed this guy and we kind of had this moment where we didn't realize how many miles were left and we were both really hurting and it kind of put me in a negative place, it was the first time that it really crossed my mind, maybe I don't want to be out here for a 50K today. When I got to the last aid station, I knew I was toast. I stopped to get a drink, and the second I stopped, I actually started to fall over. I didn't realize how in bad shape I was until that moment. One of the volunteers ran over and propped me up real quick, and at that point I just asked how many more miles until the finish line, because I knew the 50K was completely off the table. I guess I could have done it if I had the time to just hobble around in the woods for another hour and a half, but it just didn't feel worth it at that point. I went for broke to try to run a good time on the 50K. It did not happen. At that point, I just wanted to finish this thing and get off the course. So I ended up cutting out of the race early, right around 28 miles or something close to that. And honestly, I mean, it was a really awesome finish. There was a ton of people there cheering you on. The race volunteers were fantastic. But it was just one of those things where I just was feeling so down about myself. I didn't really feel like hearing people cheering for me and telling me how great of a job I did. But I guess in hindsight, it's better to have that than the opposite. And I have to be honest, it was a tough thing to leave the park that day. I had been really excited to run this race for the few days before I actually went out and did it. And I kind of left that day feeling like a bit of a failure. But if there's something I take away from having run this race to start off the trail season, it's really that in this sport, you really can't classify your days as just abject failures or complete successes. There's a lot of gray area. Once you start to have this black and white dichotomy between what's a good day and what's a bad day, it can start to kill the enjoyment of running in general. So ultimately, I drove home and I was able to hold my head high. I realized, you know what, I set a pretty lofty goal for the day and I went for it. Didn't work out, but I went for it nonetheless, and that's something to be happy about. So what did I learn from this? Because I feel like if things don't go well, the least that you can do is at least walk away with a few things to help better yourself for next time. First of all, 50K is actually a long way. I know when you start doing longer races, 50 miles, 100 Ks, 100 milers, 50K sounds like not a whole lot. But the reality is it's still 31 miles, or in this case, 32 miles. It takes a long time to run 32 miles. And if you're not mentally prepared for it, like I wasn't mentally prepared for it on that day, it feels like an eternity. 5 hours feels like an entire day of running. Also, I found that not having a crew was a little bit of a downer for me. I think logistically speaking, just with this being a spur-of-the-moment race, it made sense for me to not have a crew. But boy, what a pick-me-up it is to know that not only are you counting down the miles to the next aid station so you can get nutrition or a change of shoes or clothes or whatever, but it's so nice to count down the miles knowing you're gonna see some friendly faces, some people who are going to be cheering you on, and people that you can just talk to and kind of share how things are going. And finally, this is I think the most important thing, it's really smart to own a race. And what do I mean by that? If you just go out and run a race saying, I don't really care what happens, I'm not really that invested in this, I just feel like there's a lot of room, or maybe just a higher chance that things are going to go wrong because you haven't been mentally preparing for it. You're not really dead set on putting your heart and soul into it. And there's a little bit more wiggle room for you to kind of see an out when maybe things get tough. Overall, it was an awesome day out on the trails. This race is, I mean, there might have been 300 plus people in it. And I gotta say, I hope this thing kind of blows up over the next few years because this was a really great race. Excellent volunteers, a super energetic crowd. The course was really well marked. And best of all, it just felt like a trail ultra. Like, this thing had some creek crossings. It wasn't anything too crazy, but it was a creek crossing, you know, and you had a lot of elevation change, nothing drastic, no major climbs or descents, but just a lot of ups and downs. Just something that made you feel like, hey, I got out and I ran a trail ultra today. You gotta feel good about that. And just to end with a quick funny story, I think my one memory of this race going forward, you know, years from now, is going to be that at mile 14, there was just this random guy in a full hazmat suit handing out Corona beer in honor of the impending coronavirus outbreak that I think at that time we were all willing to laugh about. And well, you know, a couple weeks from then, we weren't really laughing so much anymore. So that's all I got for you guys today. Thanks for watching. God bless you. Keep on running.